Welcome to episode 313 of the Elevation Recovery Podcast. This is your host, Matt Finch, and in today's episode, we have a very special guest coming to share her story about addiction and recovery, and also a Kundalini awakening near-death-like experience that you won't want to miss. Betty Guadagno had a spiritually transformative experience in March of 2019. She went from a drug-addicted sex worker and self-described radical atheist to a devout believer in long-term recovery, working as a recovery coach and manifesting a life beyond her wildest dreams. Betty will take you through her awakening journey, where she was shown her pre-birth planning, her divine mission, and the interconnectedness of all things. This is a story of a very traumatic childhood, adolescence, and early adult life, and her addiction was so severe and her recovery transformation so extraordinary that her story is proof of just how much potential we have. And even with an extremely severe addiction and very few life skills and reaching a really low ultimate bottom, we can use that rock bottom, as J.K. Rowling said, as a firm foundation to rebuild our life upon. Betty Guadagno is known online as Buddha Betty, and you can find her on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all with the name Buddha Betty, or you could reach her by email at wavywanderer@gmail.com. And with that being said, let's now get into this fascinating, inspiring, and highly entertaining story that you're about to hear.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies. Hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Welcome to episode 313 of Elevation Recovery. This is Matt Finch, and today we're going to talk with Betty about her story about addiction recovery, and special treat, her NDE. Papaya is especially excited this morning. So thanks so much, Betty. It's great to see you. I can't wait to talk to you after watching your videos online. This is a special treat, so thanks for being here. I'm excited to get this one-on-one version of your story, and thank you for being so generous with your time for our audience.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm really grateful to be here, and I got really excited when I saw that it was a recovery-related podcast. I don't generally get an opportunity really to share on that particular subject. Like Matt shared, I had a near-death-like experience, so I get to share my story a lot, but it's really more centered around the spiritual experience. But recovery is such a huge part of my story. It's my entire life now. So I'm really excited to sort of share that piece of myself with you guys. So I'm going to go right into it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll paint a little picture of who I was before, how my dis-ease of addiction progressed throughout my life, and how I became a grateful person in recovery today. So I grew up in like a really chaotic, dysfunctional family. My whole family is this perpetual cycle of addiction and poverty, molestation, incest, rape. It's, been that way for generations and generations. And it's exhausting being the one to break all the generational curses, but I guess that's what I'm doing. And my parents, they were both active addicts, and, their parents taught them how to use, they taught me how to use. And I don't mean that my parents shot me up with drugs or anything. I mean that when my parents were experiencing an emotion, any emotion, it could have been depression and sadness, or it could have been joy and elation. They would smoke something, they would drink something, they would take a pill, and their emotion changed. And so I made these mental notes as a very small child who had already been through some very traumatic things in my life, that as soon as I had an opportunity to grab at any of those things to not feel, I would. And so that's what I did. And my parents, I watched their dis-ease of addiction progress throughout their lives. We were constantly getting evicted. We were really impoverished. We stole our groceries. The lights were always turned off. The gas was always turned off. It was just like a very challenging life, but I didn't know any different. I thought that everybody's life was like that. And this was in 2007, my parents, this was like the height of the Oxycontin epidemic. And so like our whole house was just constantly filled with orange prescription bottles. Everybody always had a bottle of pills in their pocket. That's how you knew they were coming. You could hear them rattling down the hallway. And my parents were constantly running out of pills. And so we would go doctor shopping, and it was like our family business. And my parents were facing another eviction. The lights were turned off again. The phone was turned off, no utilities. And they made this decision that they had to stop using drugs and end their suffering. And they did that by committing suicide with one another because they didn't know that there was any way to stop using drugs without dying. And I was 23 when that happened. My sister was 18. We found them. And I mean, there's just no words for what something like that is like. It was just this huge, open, bleeding wound of abandonment, rejection, hurt, so much stigma and shame associated with it. And I was instantly orphaned. And there was two voices in my head that were like, yeah, that came to me after this experience. One voice said, you should let go of drugs. They just killed your parents, because I was already an addict when this happened. The other voice said, you have to keep using drugs. It's all that you have left of them. What kind of daughter would you be if you let go of the legacy of your family? And in that moment, that voice seemed to make more sense to me. And in that instant, drugs became my parents. Drugs became my higher power. They became my whole universe. It absorbed into every facet of my personality. Thought that I was this party girl. I was like this feel good time. You know, like I'm covered in tattoos of liquor bottles and packs of cigarettes. And like, this was my life, you know, like this is what I was going to be forever. And, you know, my dis-ease of addiction started to progress throughout my life, and drugs became more important than anyone or anything. And, you know, it didn't start off as intense as it got. You know, like at first it was like social, it was partying, it was fun. Then it became like fun with problems. Then it became just problems. And that's how the disease of addiction progresses. And my problems just became like mounting and mounting on top of each other. I've been married and divorced a couple of times because no relationship was more important than my relationship with substances. And, you know, like I've lost jobs, homes, pets, companions, friends, everything in my life. Nothing was more important than getting messed up. I just could not handle feeling my feelings. And so I used drugs, men, sex, food, whatever I could get my hands on just to not feel. And I ended up overdosing in March of 2019. And I had this near-death-like experience where I went to heaven. And, you know, like I was a militant, radical atheist in my life, not only because my parents were drug addicts, they didn't teach me about God, but also because I didn't want to believe in God after what happened to my parents or all the things that had happened to me. I didn't want to believe in a creator that would allow things like that to happen. And the only thing that I kind of knew about God was just like little bits and pieces from the Bible that you sort of pick up in the world. And I knew that in the Bible, it says that if you commit suicide, you go someplace really terrible. And I couldn't imagine my parents suffering their whole lives and then being condemned to suffer for all of eternity. So I just stayed hidden from God because it seemed a lot easier until I had this experience, until I had this spiritual experience. And it became real clear to me real fast that my personal pursuit of atheism was misguided. So I have some language for what happened to me today. It's called a Kundalini awakening. And if you don't know what Kundalini energy is, neither did I. Kundalini energy is described as life force energy. So in different cultures, they call it different things. In the Western world, we might call it receiving the Holy Spirit. And in Eastern philosophy, it's called Kundalini. So basically, we have this spiritual body. It's these 7 chakra systems inside of our spiritual selves. And the Kundalini energy rises from the base of your spine up to the crown of your head to activate your chakras. So these are systems in my body that have never been awoken, never been activated. I didn't even know what a chakra was. I definitely didn't know anything about spiritual awakening. So as this rush of energy was going up and down my body, as my third eye and my crown opened, it was like my spirit shot out of my head and started to travel into the space of eternity. I was greeted by loved ones that had crossed over. My father was there waiting for me to guide me through. I also had a boyfriend who had recently passed away. He was there as well. And I just kept hearing my boyfriend say to me, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And it was like this repeating message over and over and over again. And it was just filling me up. And then I sort of experienced a bit of a life review. I started to instantaneously feel every emotion that I'd ever experienced in my life, and every emotion of the other person, what they experienced in their life, in our interactions with each other. And the one that was very prevalent in my experience was my parents' suicide. So not only did I re-feel that as a grieving daughter, but I also felt it from their point of view, and like the angst and desperation that they were feeling when they made this decision and committed this act together. I thought that I would never be able to escape it. And then as I continued to travel into the space of eternity, those feelings sort of washed off of me, and I started to get enveloped in the unconditional love and grace that is the infinite. And I found myself kind of like on a platform. It almost felt like a laboratory. And there was this long sort of card table, and there were these beings behind it. And they were sort of thumbing through this big, huge book. And they were like, oh yeah, you're going back. You're not supposed to be here yet. and everything was just like, obviously so bizarre. I just thought that I was like really messed up. All I knew is that I took a bunch of drugs, and now I thought that I was like in some other dimension, So they told me that I had to go back to Earth. That was the first thing that they said. And I don't really have adequate words to describe what it feels like to be there. But this is the best way that I can describe it. So in my life, it felt like I was constantly being fractured into these small shards of glass. Like maybe when I started life, I was like this nice window pane. And then every time something happened to me in my life, a hammer would hit it and it would splinter. And then eventually throughout my life, it just started to crack into all these little pieces. And the pieces almost became so small that they were like dust. And being in that space of eternity, that was the glue that took all the shards of glass and made them into this beautiful mosaic that was my spirit. And so it was this beautiful sense of, like reunion, like finally being in a space where I was actually home and whole. And I had never experienced even a fraction of those feelings before in my life. So there was no way that I was leaving. And they just kept saying, they told me that I'm a spiritual warrior, that I signed up to come to Earth, that I'm here for the greatest time that Earth has ever experienced, because we are in the midst of transformation. There's a transformation of consciousness underway. I signed up to be here for it. I signed up to transmute negative energy to help bring in the light. And it was like really inspiring and motivating how they were saying it. And I was like, oh my God, this story is so cool. I'm still not going back. I said, well, if I'm part of a spiritual army, I'm a spiritual warrior. There's got to be other spiritual soldiers down there doing the job. Like, I'm just going to grab my pajamas, a bowl of popcorn. I'll watch the show from up here. You guys don't need me down there. And then they took me through the details of my pre-birth plan so that I could understand why my life was the way that it was and why I most certainly had to go back to Earth. So the way that it looked in my mind's eye was a lot like a video game. And they told me that I had chosen every aspect of my life before coming to Earth. And, like I had experienced a lot of very dense energy in my life, And so I was like very combative to this idea. Well, there's no way that I would pick any of these things. And so they showed me the moment. And it looked a lot like a video game to me. There was this man, he greeted me. He was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora. He had an empty grocery cart. And he said, okay, pick your life. And so we started walking down these grocery store aisles. And there were these cereal boxes that were lining the wall. And every cereal box had a different life experience on it. And I could perceive myself as this orb of light getting ready to go to Earth. And I was so excited. And I was like, well, if I'm going to Earth, I'm really going to Earth. We're going to get everything. And I just start grabbing all these cereal boxes off the shelves. I'm throwing them in this cart. The cart is rapidly filling up. I'm grabbing experiences like sexual trauma, physical abuse, emotional abuse, the double suicide of my parents, picking the family line that I would be born into, addiction, prostitution, poverty, dereliction. And then there was also cereal boxes in the cart that I hadn't gotten to in my life yet, like overcoming, recovery, speaking, writing, transformation, but none of these things had happened yet in my life. So they just seemed like they were space fillers to me in that moment. So I go through every aspect of my pre-birth planning. I see the souls that I sign up for certain lessons with, and I see what the lessons are and the reasons why I'm going to experience them in this life. And again, I was like, wow, this is so great to have all this information. I am still not going back. There's no way. I said, you guys don't tell us what Earth is actually like. You don't prepare us at all. It's way denser than you ever could have described. And there's just no way that I'm going back. And they said, listen, this isn't a punishment. This is something that you signed up for. You're halfway through. You can't jump off the ride now. So if you refuse to go back into her, meaning into my body, then we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into, and you'll experience the same life experiences again on top of a few more in this new body. And so they showed me this beautiful baby, and they showed me everything about her gender, her ethnicity, where she would be born, who her parents were, the family line, her mission, her purpose, her adversity. And this baby had even deeper levels of challenges than I had already experienced. And I thought, well, there's no way that I can start from zero. So if these are my only options, I guess we'll just go back into her. And I, could still perceive my body outside myself. And as I sort of sifted back into my awareness, they said, trust us. Your life will not be nearly as challenging as the first half was. The first half of your life was boot camp. The second half will be carrying out the mission, and you'll have help. Trust us. And I was like, I do not trust you. And then I just kind of found myself back in my awareness. And I just wrote the entire experience off as drug-induced psychosis, because who wouldn't? It was, just like totally not anywhere in my realm of understanding. And so I just went about my life. And then the universe, source, my angels, my guides, they stepped in this very loud, tangible way so that I could not mistake that this was an actual experience that happened. I really needed to let go of drugs and come onto my path. And so like all these divine synchronicities started to take place. For instance, all the drug dealers that I had been dealing with for over a decade, they all simultaneously decided to change their lives and stop selling drugs. People that did not know each other. So like I'd call up a dealer, I'd be like, hey man, what's good? He'd be like, listen, I found Jesus. I want to be a good father. I'm out of the game. And I'm like, okay, weird. Click, call up the next guy. Same exact story, but they did not know each other. So now I had no way to get drugs, and I had a physical dependency to opiates. I was a heroin addict. So, this was like not okay not to be able to not get that, because, the fear of being physically sick is just, it's so all encompassing. And so I found myself on day 3 of heroin withdrawal, and I was sicker than I had ever been in my 20 plus years of using opiates. And I had this thought, and I said, man, I couldn't even kill myself if I wanted to right now, because I'm so sick that I can't even get up out of this bed and figure out a way to kill myself. And right then I heard a voice, and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And, I was like in the throes of desperation. So I was like, okay, strange voice. I want to no longer be physically dependent on heroin. They told me to close my eyes, lay back, count backwards from 10. And as I did, these 2 little men appeared in my mind's eye, and they were wearing these white lab coats, and these little lawnmowers manifested in front of them. And I watched these 2 men go in separate directions and start to go through every crevice of my mind. And as they walked through the crevices of my mind with these lawnmowers, I felt these intense hot tingles. And when they were done mapping out my mind, I felt a plunger on the crown of my head, and it plunged down and back up. And in this bright white flash, I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. I mean, like moments before, I was sick all over myself from both ends, sweating hot and cold. It felt like my bones were on fire, like my skin was made of broken glass. And then in an instant, I was completely well and healed. And I threw myself on the ground and I was crying out to God, how could this be happening to me? I don't believe in this. I don't believe in you. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And so after that, my path became, well, almost crystal clear. I knew that I had to do recovery. Like I knew that that was going to be part of it, but I had just been healed. So I thought, well, if I can get healed, so can everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I started running around New York City, laying my hands on like homeless people on the street. And I was like, I can heal you from your addiction. I have the power. And it was insane. I was on the subway proselytizing, screaming in people's faces about God and the infinite. And, it was so wacky. And thank goodness for my integration process kind of helping me through settling all of that. But, like in all of that sort of insanity, I had a lot of faith. I had this newfound, newly born faith, and it was not penetrable, like it was everything in my world. And I just knew that whatever was going to happen was going to happen. Like I knew that I was guided. And so I found myself on a train. I had no destination. I was just sitting there like totally confused and looking to heal random people. And this man appeared across from me, and he was wearing a Narcotics Anonymous necklace. And I heard a voice and it said, "That's your path. Follow him to a meeting." And that was on June 1st, 2019. And I've been clean ever since. So it was about 2 months after the spiritual experience in heaven and about 1 to 2 weeks after the spontaneous healing. So I went to a meeting, and, they say in 12-step fellowship to make 90 meetings in 90 days. And I just kept going to meetings because I didn't know what else to do. And so I went to another meeting the next day, and it was a women's meeting, and I did not look the way that I look now when I came into this process. Like I looked beat up. I had picked these huge holes in my face. I was a methamphetamine addict. So like I always thought that there was bugs inside of me. I used to cut myself open, set myself on fire with lighters, trying to get the bugs out of me. All of my teeth, most of my teeth rotted out. And thank God for recovery, allowing me to buy a smile in my life again today. I was really skinny, sunken in, gray skin, completely dead in my eyes. And so when I walked into this women's meeting, this woman saw me, and she obviously saw the condition that I was in. And she grabbed me like she knew me, and she hugged me so tight. And she whispered in my ear and she said, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe," which is the same message that my boyfriend was telling me in my spiritual experience in heaven. And I just knew that it was another sign that I was on the right path. And so I went to another meeting the next day. And again, I was just so broken. I didn't know how to do anything without being high first. I didn't know how to take a shower. I didn't know how to get dressed. I didn't know how to do anything without being on some sort of substance first. And so I'm in this big, huge meeting. It's like 75, 80 people. And it feels like every person is sharing a message that is directly for me. I mean, like they didn't even know I was there, but it really felt like every message was directly from source for my ears. And so, I had a thought that I just didn't know how to be a person. How was I ever going to accomplish this huge thing of letting go of the only life that I had ever known? And I heard a voice, and it said to turn my head to the right. And sitting 2 seats away from me was the program director of a long-term therapeutic community, a long-term rehab for women here in Brooklyn, where I live. So I just had a thought that I didn't know how to be a person. And now I happen to be sitting right next to a woman whose life's purpose, passion, and profession is teaching women how to be women again after the use of drugs and alcohol. And I just knew that it was another sign. And I knew I had to ask her for help, but I had no idea how to do that. And so I kind of saw this little version of myself in my mind's eye. And she was like, She presented herself as my courage. And she said, I'm your courage and I'm here to help you. She was like doing jumping jacks and push-ups. She's like punching the air. She's like, we can do this. I'm going to help you. We're going to talk to this lady. We can do it. So like, all throughout the meeting, like she's there with me. She's hyping me up. I'm like all lit up. I'm amped. I'm ready to go. The meeting ends. I walk over to where the woman is. I'm ready to talk to her. I'm ready to change my life. And the woman was gone. She left the meeting early. And I felt totally defeated. So with my head hanging, I walked to the bus to go home. And when I stepped onto the bus, that woman was sitting right there. She left the meeting early and was somehow on the exact same bus as me. And I ran up to her totally manic. And I was like, oh my God, I think that you're an angel. You're sent to earth. You're here for me. I want to talk to you in there, but you weren't there because you're here. You should talk to me here. And I'm really need help. Can you help me? Please, 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 please. Will you help me? And she said, yeah, we can help you. And she said it so calmly, like she had been waiting there forever for me. She said, yeah, we can help you. Come by tomorrow. We have a bed. And I went to that program the very next day with just the clothes on my back. I didn't have anything to take. My most prized possession was a $200 vibrator. I didn't have a lot. I didn't have a lot going for me. I figured if I could leave that behind, I could do anything. I like literally thought about taking it. I was like, would they let me have this in here? But I left it behind and I started my new life. And when I got to that long-term rehab, it was a 9 to 12 month program. I ended up staying there for 17 months, which is an insanely long amount of time. I didn't have access to a cell phone or the internet for a year and a half. That's its own sort of addiction that I was able to overcome. And I had this insatiable thirst for knowledge while I was there. I had no idea what had happened to me in my spiritual experience, and nobody there did either. Like I just kind of went into treatment and I was like, the star, the sun, the moon, they're all connected to us. And everybody was like, what is up with this chick? She's totally crazy. But I did have this insatiable thirst for knowledge. And so I read every sacred text while I was there because I had time and space. I didn't have to worry about food or shelter or clothing. Like everything was taken care of for me. So I could just sit and learn and heal and feel and become my most authentic self, become this version of me that was not my addiction. And so I read every sacred text. I read everything I could get my hands on about metaphysics and the law of attraction. And I began to manifest my reality. And at first it was just like small things like, I'm going to see a blue ball today. And then they would randomly take us out to go play handball, which is something they had never done before. And it's a blue rubber ball to go play handball with. And, like all these sort of signs like that were happening. So I figured, if I can manifest a blue ball, I could probably manifest a bag of peanuts. And I just kept like trying and succeeding and trying and succeeding. And so eventually I was able to manifest some schooling for myself. I went to school to become a peer advocate. I have a job in the recovery field today, which is a wild sentence to say. In active addiction, I was a prostitute. And not only would I prostitute myself, but I would manipulate other women, get them strung out on drugs so that I could prostitute them as well to make money from my own addiction. And today I have this amazing opportunity to make a universal amends. And I assist women on their healing journeys today. And it's more than I ever could have thought for myself. And because of all the spiritual work that I continuously do on myself, and I work the 12 steps in a 12-step program, I can say that sentence to you and not fall apart. Because my past doesn't have any bondage over my present or my future. And also this download of the pre-birth plan really helps me with all of that acceptance as well. Everything is happening in divine right order. It's all part of a sacred play. I'm playing my part. And in some people's lives, I played the villain. And so all that I can do about that really today is just continue to be, like the protagonist in the story, as opposed to who I was before. So I went to school, I got a job, I got an apartment, I was homeless. I lived in a rehab for a year and a half, got a beautiful home, and I started to enter my spiritual communities that would help me along my way. I entered 12-step fellowship. There was too many divine signs letting me know that that was going to be my path. There was no way that I wasn't going to do that. And I still belong to 12-step fellowship. I have 4 years and 25 days clean as of today. My clean date is June 1st, 2019. And, like my life has transformed so much. I found the members of my soul family inside this recovery community. And because I have this great foundation in my life in recovery and community, I've learned how to bring that into the other areas of my life that I feel very passionate about as well. So there's a couple of sacred texts that really speak to me. One of them is A Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles is a metaphysical text. It's a channeled message from Jesus, channeled through the mind of a militant atheist psychotherapist from Columbia University in the 1970s. And it's a reprogramming. It's a book that is obviously not from a human mind. It seems very divine to me, and it's something that I hold very close to my heart and on my recovery and spiritual journey. And so I have a Course in Miracles community. I also study the Baha'i faith, which is the youngest religion in the world, and they believe in all manifestations of God. So Abraham, Moses, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad, and they also have their own prophet from the late 1800s, and they believe that there will be more manifestations of God in the future. And I'm not a Baha'i myself, but I love their scripture so much. And so I have a community where we study that together as well. And I also belong to a group for near-death experiencers and spiritual experiencers with the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And just being able to find a community of people who all have similar stories to my own has been so transformative for me. I have found my tribes. These are the people that I am meant to grow and learn with. And for me, the biggest part of my recovery journey is being able to depend on other people, and to be a dependable person for other people as well, because that's not who I was before. People used to run away from me, let alone like ask me to speak. No way. People couldn't stand me. And my life really has transformed so much. And if that's possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. Like the spiritual experience aside, for me, being in a 12-step fellowship has been the baseline of my recovery. And, you don't have to have a near-death experience to practice the 12 steps. The 12th step promises you a spiritual awakening. And so for me, the underlying message remains, my spiritual awakening is about bringing me closer to my purpose. And my purpose is being of service to other people. And I get to do that in all of these beautiful aspects of my life, creating space, creating healing space, just being a person that can listen. And that's my story. Thank you so much for giving me space to share. And thank you for staying so present for it.
Yeah, totally speechless. That the whole thing. I'm like just imagining the audience listening to this right now for the very first time. The way you presented all that, no like you're just, your purpose is definitely doing this. And congrats, you, it seems like you were on the path of like service to self. It was just me. And then so it was service to self, me, my problems, my drugs, my needs, my desires, at the expense of other people, right? Harmful speech, harmful action, all these things, just creating all this negative karma. But then there's the soul contracts and everything, and all is like that. But you just made a radical switch, like no more. And then you went not just the service to others path, but like full service to others, where you're not just living your purpose, but you're straight up embodying your dharma, like really powerfully too, not just a little bit. It's like the full expression of what it is. You're super clear like you're just so clear and focused. And so going to that other realm, you know, the spiritual realm, and having that experience, that probably made it so much easier to have that faith. And so that's why I love listening and watching on YouTube and listening on podcasts to near-death experiences, near-death-like experiences, life between life and past life hypnosis, regression, stuff like that. Reading various sacred texts, probably not as many as you. Wow, it sounds like it was like a partial rehab for addiction, but also a partial, like your own, instead of going to like a college to get a degree in something, you did your own like self-study and degree and all that. So it's just, oh, just the way everything lined up. And when you had all those synchronicities, that's better than any drug high that I've ever experienced, right? When you get not just a good synchronicity, but maybe there's a day where there's several, that's better than any drug high, right?
Oh my
Gosh.
goodness, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And I, that can also become very addictive too. Like,
Yeah.
where's my spiritual experience for the day? Give it to me,
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again. And where can people find you? Where's the best place if they want to? You said earlier when we were kind of wrapping before this that you're working on a podcast that's got, I think, around 19 episodes or something. And you've got an
Yes.
Instagram, a really awesome Instagram, which I recommend. So where are all the websites, resources, and what kind of stuff are you excited about for the future? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, so I am on social media. My handle on everything is Buddha Betty.
Right.
That's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And I also have a podcast for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And you can find that at Ian's Videos on YouTube. It's also linked on my YouTube as well. And yeah, so I'm really excited for holding space for spiritual experiencers. That's like what I really feel called to do right now. I also have a coaching business. I help people through whatever area of their life they're looking to transform, like thanks to my time away and like having all this time and space to cultivate some of my spiritual gifts and just some of my, just like being able to live a life that is transformed. I've been able to pick up some key things that I think are really, really well used in assisting others in transformation as well. So yeah, I that's what I see for my future, and I'm really excited for it, just being able to assist others on their own healing journeys.